Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, campaigners are in Downing Street this morning protesting over education cuts. They'll hand over tens of thousands of messages of support from pupils from 70 schools across the country. Well, joining us from outside the gates of Downing Street are the actor Steve Coogan and the co-founder of the Save Our Schools campaign, Alison Ali. Alison Ali, what are you hoping to achieve by this protest?
OK, well, we've heard a lot from the government recently about how they're intending to be a more listening government. We really, really hope that they haven't listened to heads, they haven't listened to teachers over 7 years of cuts. What we hope today is that they listen to more than 30,000 children who have written messages of love about their schools and detailing everything they like and the stuff that they don't want to see cut.
And Steve Coogan, why have you got involved in this?
Well, I support the state education system. Over 93% of the people in this country use state education, and this government, through the back door, has been slowly killing it with death by 1,000 cuts, and I'm not prepared to see that happen. I think a lot of people in this country are sort of waking up to the fact that through the back door the government are trying to change the nature of education in this country to be something that just becomes a safety net almost, and the derogation of its responsibility. A lot of these cuts having a material effect on children all over the country, and the first thing to be hit is the arts, is music, is sport, these areas that enhance children's lives and that actually put this country on the map throughout the world with our cultural heritage.
I mean, you're talking about cuts, but as a result of the election, the government this week, its education ministers clarified their position. It's not what they were advocating in their manifesto, but they did say that in the new settlement of payment to schools, there will be no diminution of budgets. They also did a U-turn on getting rid of free lunches in primary schools. So in a sense, haven't you done your job already?
If I could step in there, no, we haven't. So far, the figures the government have talked about are an extra £4 billion. That was actually on the table before the election. That would still equate, according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, to a real terms cut of 7%, which is absolutely massive. Justine Greening has talked herself about £1 billion per year going into education. That would still equate to a massive, massive real-term funding cut. So no, the battle isn't over. We want to be heard.
And Steve Coogan, if there's more money needed, where should it come from?
Well, I think it either comes from increased taxation or reallocation of resources. You only have to look at the folly of the free schools experiment this government embarked on all those years ago to see that they still require an extra £2.5 billion just to secure the land for the 500 schools that Michael Gove promised. That's almost the equivalent to the same amount of cuts the government's suggesting that the schools need to find, that state schools need to find.
But you don't think there needs to be some variety in the state school system so parents have choice?
I think the free schools experiment is a busted flush already, if you ask most people. And I think, it's about reallocation of resources and increased taxation. And I think if you look at the recent polls, that over 50% of the population realise that if you want to provide the things that the government should provide, and state education is not a privilege, it's a right, then to do that you need to readjust your taxation system along with reallocation of resources.
So it is an increase in taxation for education that you advocate?
That's
part of the solution, certainly, yeah.
I think if you look at people earning over £80,000, paying a little bit more in income tax, I personally would not have a problem with that. Quite frankly, this is not our problem to solve. This is the government's problem to solve. They can find £1 billion to do a dodgy deal with the DUP. They can find trillions to bail out banks. They can surely find £3 billion a year to give our children the education they deserve.
But you see, it's an interesting question, this.
Who can argue with that?
You say quite correctly that education is a right and that it's for everyone, and yet when it comes to paying for it, you say that it should only be the people earning over 80,000. I mean, surely if education is this universal right and you want the quality that everyone wants, then everyone has to be prepared to pay for it. It's not just a question of heaping it onto the shoulders of a minority.
Adam, I'm terribly sorry. If you look at something like the National Association of Head Teachers website, what you see on that website is head teachers scratching their heads over how they manage to teach kids who are going into those state schools hungry. Kids who are turning up without having had breakfast. Kids who are turning up because after a week's holiday, parents have had to skip evening meals just to feed their kids. So what we're talking about is a system that is completely broken. There are many, many people in this country who can't afford to feed their children, let alone pay extra in tax on money they don't earn to fund an education system that, as the fifth largest economy in the world, we are perfectly capable of funding.
Yes. It's not just the rich who have to pay for it, it's the middle income as well, isn't it, Steve Coogan?
Yes, of course it is, but the thing is, I think people are prepared to do that for certain things. That the health service and the state education system in this country are valued very highly by the vast majority of people in this country, and they're prepared to put their hands in their pockets to pay for it. And also, it's like, as Alison said, it's the government's problem. That is part of their responsibilities to provide a decent state education system. Maybe they're not bothered because many of their children don't use the state education system, but the 93% of the people in this country do use it, and it's a right, and they need to honour that right.
Okay. On that point, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Next, school funding became one of the key battlegrounds during the general election campaign. It was mainly driven by parents and teachers holding protests across the capital, and they're continuing to do that. Our education reporter Mark Ashdown is with me, and this was a tough one on the doorstep.
Yes, absolutely. In their post-election debrief, Conservative backbenchers have been feeding back this was the most difficult policy area to explain to voters. On the one hand, the government was saying we're putting record levels of investment into schools, which is true, mainly because there's more pupils than ever. On the other hand, we had heads saying we're taking on extra costs, we can't balance the books. Then, of course, there was this, a website which popped up, laying bare, really, how much schools were going to lose. It was quite simple. You could put in your area, your postcode. I've chosen Tower Hamlets here as an example. It was one of the areas expected to be hardest hit. You could then put in your exact school and find out, in a random example, as I've done here, look, this school was going to lose £500,000 over the next 5 years, £800 per pupil. Now, that equates to 13 teachers. No wonder it was a hard sell.
And we know that protests are still going on, including one today.
Yes, these sort of picnic protests, as they were dubbed, at school gates in local parks. They've carried on, driven by parents. This one today was entitled SOS, Save Our Schools, delivering a petition to Downing Street school children. This one, though, had celebrity backing as well, Steve Coogan. Now, he's a prominent Labour supporter. Of course, Labour was promising to invest more money into schools, Jeremy Corbyn, so the pressure really was intensifying, and he's carrying on the government.
OK, for now, Mark, we'll leave it there. But let's bring in now Joe Yerke from North London, who helped organise the campaign group Fair Funding for All Schools. Good evening to you, Joe. If the government has said that no school will lose out on funding, why do parents like yourself still feel the need to protest?
Well, one of the things that's really annoying parents, actually, is the government's continued use of these meaningless sound bites rather than setting out the detail of their spending plans about how they're going to solve this funding crisis. The fact is that schools are already losing out. The Institute of Fiscal Studies and the National Audit Office have both said that our schools are facing the largest cuts for decades. The Public Accounts Committee has called the government deluded. Per pupil funding is going down. Conservative MPs themselves know this. As you've mentioned, this was a toxic issue for them on the doorstep. One poll reported 870,000 voters changed their vote on the basis of school funding alone. We intend to keep up the pressure. We intend to make sure this remains a toxic issue until they address the funding of our schools. And you've seen the protests today, thousands of messages from children across the country delivered to Downing Street. And on the 16th of July, parents will be descending on Parliament Square for a mass picnic protest to keep up the pressure and show we're not going anywhere until they sort this problem out.
Clearly, this issue of money very, very pressing for parents like yourselves. Can you give us any examples of the impact you've already seen?
Yes, well, we're contacted by parents from across the country who are concerned. You know, we're parents, we're using the schools, so we can see the reality on the ground of what's happening. And while the government is busy doing nothing, cuts are being made now, and they will continue to be cut. So we hear from parents who are unhappy that their teaching assistants are going, that their support staff that they relied on and that they valued the work that they were doing are going, that the A-level offers or the curriculum offer generally is reducing. Parents who are unhappy that their children can't study the subjects that they wanted to study. Parents, of course, are being asked to put their hands in their pockets and find money at a time when many parents don't have spare money. We're also, you know, unhappy that class sizes are increasing. This really is a desperate situation, and parents are deeply unhappy about it. And that's why we're going to continue protesting. You're going to continue seeing this kind of action of parents who don't normally get involved in this kind of thing and don't, you know, aren't the sort of usual suspects or the type of people who would wish to be doing this kind of thing. But we're doing it because we're desperate and because we're deeply concerned, and that's why we'll be back in Parliament Square on the 16th of July for a mass picnic protest.
OK, Joe Yerke, many thanks for joining us this evening. Mark is still here, and you were listening to that. Very passionate words there from Joe. Is this pressure from parents making a difference?
Well, I think it already has. I mean, the government will say they are doing something. I mean, the Conservative manifesto promised £4 billion extra for schools. I know that Justine Greening, the Education Secretary, has been pushing for more. She feels another £1 billion at least is needed. Now, she's been knocking on a door which previously has been closed. There's a sense it could open now, but the timing is crucial here. I'm told possibly not to expect anything before the school holidays in a few weeks. But for heads and parents, as we heard there, they feel the clock is ticking. Schools are running on empty. They need some answers on the money soon.
OK, Mark, thanks very much. Our education reporter, Mark Ashdown.